Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to start a new theme this week as it is Monday. This one's going to be abrupt endings. We're going to be looking at songs that they just stop at the end. Unceremoniously. We're doing something and then the music is done. We're going to kick this off with some Deafheaven, the track Revelator, which appears to be a new track. I guess I'll have to check this out later. This music video or official audio music video, probably, it came out just a couple of months ago. So, let's dive into this and see what Deafheaven is bringing to the table today. A really interesting pattern on the rhythmic accentuation. That half-step tension. They allow more space in those moments. Nice contrast to this very full sound. There's almost a melodic quality to the vocals too. Nice cymbal work to lighten this up a little bit, already with the sparser drums. That's a nice shift. The heavy reverb, the spaciousness between accents on the vocals. Wait, is that it? Oh no, okay. Nice movements of the, was that a guitar? This chord progression feels similar to one of the progressions used in the metallic sections. And I find that interesting because I find the acoustic guitar work to be very somber and melancholic. I don't hear melancholy here though. All right. Yeah, I probably could have run that through Spotify. For some reason, I thought there was a music video to that. Anyways, wild stuff right here. This is Blackened adjacent, maybe blackgaze. It definitely has a lot of the weight, oppression, and aggression of that style of music. The the production of it is very fuzzy and claustrophobic, but it doesn't necessarily lean towards something that is very one-dimensional in its sound either. There's variety of melody, of harmony. We have a little bit of instrumentation shifting as we get to that penultimate section there, the acoustic guitar part. A little bit of variety there. Keeps things slightly fresh. But I do find this to be generally more listenable than most black metal, which is why I kind of want to push it towards the gaze side, because that's usually where black metal tends to be a bit more palatable for me, since there's a higher emphasis on, I guess, different emotional palettes would possibly be the way to go about describing that. Black metal just tends to have a lot of eerie and sharper chord progressions and melodies, whereas black gaze tends to have softer, more melancholic, or even bright sounds. And of course, those are blanket statements. There's obviously going to be fringe cases, but I feel like that is a way that as far as my gut tells me, is a clean differentiation between those two genres, where the shoegaze elements help influence the compositional side of the black metal playing. And that's, like I said, that to me is how shoegaze is different than black metal, or sorry, black gaze is different than black metal. So let's start there. The weightiness of it all. Lots of drum work all the time, lots of guitar work all the time. The vocalist is shouting all the time. This is just always in your face, running at a full 10 all the time. It's heavy, it's weighty, and I did pick up a little bit of melancholy at the end that maybe I just needed a little bit of a nudge in that direction to feel out. It's definitely not something I picked up in the first part of the song. I didn't notice it until we hit the acoustic section. However, I'm pretty sure the ending is just a repeat of one of the sections, prior to the acoustic part, which means it was always there and I just never picked it up. But generally, the sound of the instruments overpower much of the harmonic element, and the production, the fuzziness of it, the overpowering wall of sound, both of these elements overshadow the harmonic component of the song for me. I find it difficult to attune to that, which is something I've brought up in metal in general. The sound of metal tends to dominate my emotional feeling of the song. Um, and any harmonic part can get lost in that. And the more extreme the metal is, when we're talking about thrash or blackened, or well, actually, doom is pretty apparent on the surface. The style definitely supplements the emotional weight usually, but stuff like this, the sound and production can certainly overpower the emotional weight of the chords and the composition itself for me, and that's probably just what happened here. I missed the emotional aspect because I was blinded by the speed, the ferocity, the overbearingness of it, the wall of sounds. There's quite a bit of movement to this though, and I want to highlight that. I can hear the guitar riffs, which is pretty good. Clarity in blackened adjacent music is not always a given, and I can make out the guitar riffs in here. I can make out the vocal parts, not necessarily the words, but I can hear syllables or where a syllable might end, I suppose might be a better way to say that. I can hear a lot of the drum work. I don't really pick up too much bass. Like I felt a general bass presence, but I couldn't really hear individual notes, probably because they're doing the same 8th or 16th note playing that the guitars are a majority of the time. That's my hypothesis on that. I could be wrong though. Regardless, the guitar riffs that I do hear, nice movement to them. Usually still a consistent movement of note, whether that's constant 8th notes, constant 16th notes, but there is fluctuation in accent pattern. And this, I think, paired with different times that the notes will change. So instead of just saying, I'm going to hold out this note for 16 hits and then I'll hold out this next one for 16 hits, sometimes they change that up. Usually alongside the accent patterns. So whenever we have a new accented note, that's usually a pitch change accompanying it. And since the rhythmic aspect shifts, the pattern of which and when we change pitches also shifts throughout. So it does create a little bit of variety there. I think overall, though, the guitars are hyper focused on doing one thing, being loud, large, and dark. There's always something moody about the guitar work, whether it is the sound of the guitar or the chords and notes that it is playing. The drums have a lot of variety to them too, and this was one thing that I think really elevates the track. I think without it, it's a pretty straightforward song as far as vocal and guitar work. The drums, I think, is what elevates most sections. Or I should say, brings attention to individual sections instead of the whole thing blurring together, which I think if you listen primarily to the guitar and vocals, that can certainly happen. The drummer makes sure that things are shifting and changing and evolving, whether it is blast beats or alternating basic kick or a tom run, something a bit more syncopated with varying accent pattern and movement from up and down the toms, which all have their own pitch to them. So there's a little bit of melodic work to that too. Um, and even that one part where the drums pretty much quit everything. We had a snare on like beat 2 of every bar. That was it. Cymbals were rather sparse. Bass kick was rather sparse. It really made that section open up. The drums had so much control over intensity, feeling of speed, feeling of spaciousness. Everything else is pretty static. The guitars don't really change the way they sound or how often they're playing. The vocals don't really change how they sound or what they're produced like either. The drums, though, they change how often they play, what parts of the kit they're playing. It allows each of the moments of this song to have a bit of a unique identity in temporal feel, but also atmospheric feeling too. As I mentioned, some of these places or some of these sections can get very spacious. It feels like there's a lot of time between individual hits, which is a way, I suppose, of feeling out time, where it feels like the drums have slowed down so much. But as far as I hear those moments, it's not so much about a tempo shift as it is about opening up space. The tempo, I'm still counting it at the same speed. I just perceive the drummer to be playing less often. But you can also perceive it as, cutting the tempo in half or even a quarter at times if you want to count it slower. That's absolutely a valid way to read those moments too. But it does drastically change the feeling from section to section, and it's all because of the drummer. No one else really changes too much. Now, I do want to bring up the vocals a little bit because I find this to be interesting. I had made a comment during the reaction itself that the vocalist almost appears to be having some sort of pitched element to their delivery. I'm curious what kind of vocal technique this is, because I know even if you're doing pure compression, whether that's a false chord or a fry scream, that the shape of your mouth is going to change the perceived pitch. And I wonder if that's what's happening here, or if they are injecting a little bit of cleans in there, doing a compressed clean or a mixed, like harsh and clean, that allows them to inject some real pitch into their sounds. At this moment, I'm not sure, because the vocals, as they are clearer than other Blackened adjacent tracks that we've listened to in the past, they're still kind of obscured. Whether that's the production, the general compression on the track, and the compression on the instrument, or just the way that the vocals aren't necessarily super prominent in the spotlight. They compete with the drums and the guitars. It's balanced nicely for the sound of the song, but if I wanted to understand what the vocalist is doing, the vocals are way too low for that. And they're also quite a bit lower than your typical mainstream placement of vocals, whether that's pop or electronic or rock, even your mainstream metal, particularly the realm of like metalcore. The vocals are going to be a bit higher and pulled out of the rest of the instrumentation mix and just given a bit more prominence in the overall sound of the song. And here they're not. Like I said, it works fine for what the track is doing, but it's different than usual, or I guess different than what's common today. That might be a better way to say it. And it's difficult for me to hear through. So I don't actually know what's going on there. I'd love to hear one with the vocal boosted a little bit, whether that might be like a live one take for the vocalist. Maybe there's a YouTube video of that. Maybe somebody's found a way to isolate the vocal track. Maybe someone has the stems for it. I'm curious what they sound like, because there is an element of pitched movement to it. It isn't just one static tone throughout. Now, I'm not going to say that it's highly dynamic, but I do hear a little bit of variance to it. There is a sort of melodic movement to the delivery, and I personally appreciate that. Even though there are certainly some growls and harshes that I might enjoy the texture of, I don't enjoy listening to that for a 6-minute song, much less a 40 to 60-minute album. I need a little bit more variety than that. And this vocalist brings that. I don't know if it's enough to keep my attention for a full album, but it certainly worked for this track. Again, we're not talking about massive gaps between like their lowest perceived note and their highest perceived note. It is still rather contained. But the fact that there's a little bit of movement to it helps me digest it a little bit, helps me appreciate it a little bit more, meets me somewhere halfway between metallic sounds and what I prefer vocal work to be. And I appreciate that. I think I praised Deafheaven for this in the past too, so it doesn't surprise me here. The only other thing I think worth bringing up then is the bridge. I don't know what to say about it other than the fact that it just drastically changes everything. We have an abrupt pre-ending here where the metallic side just stops. We have this acoustic guitar work that presents one of the chord progressions in the song. Like I said, I think I've heard that elsewhere in the track. It is similar-ish to some of the chords that the metallic guitar work is presenting, but it removes all of the production clutter, everything that could distract from the chord progression and the emotions it's moving through, and it clearly lays out, hey, this is pretty melancholic here. I'm not going to allow you to miss this. And it sort of just exists here for a while. I almost think it went on too long, but I don't actually know how long it was. I just remember thinking something needs to happen here. More layers, get back to the metal, whatever. Let's bring this somewhere. And then, of course, out of nowhere, the metallic section comes back and really punches in. I talk about contrast in the past a lot, about using different sounds to emphasize a core sound. And this band's core sound is large and loud. 4 minutes into the track, it just kind of becomes, I mean, it's still a loud track. It's still very full. This is a massive sound, but it does become something, at least I personally, acclimated to until we came back to it after the acoustic bit, and it sounded louder than ever. Now, we have statistics over here, looking at the volume meters. Nothing's changed. We've just gone back up to where we were, but it feels loud, loud and larger now than it did previously. Even when the song kicked in, I don't think I had that same reaction to the sound as when we came out of the acoustic section. It just sounds bigger and gnarlier and louder. That's the power of contrast. I think that's one of my favorite examples there. We were at 10. We brought it down to like a 3. We went back up to 10, but now it feels like an 11. And that's a good example of that. But I don't really understand maybe the purpose of that. Maybe the lyrics will explain why there's a lull in here, but as far as I can tell, it's purely functional. It does a great job of solidifying the emotional elements of the song while also providing contrast so that we can finish just as big as we started, and maybe even, as I mentioned, feeling a little bigger. Let me hit some lyrics on this one, see what's going on, and then we're going to wrap this one up. Alright, and this song appears to be a call to arms for everyone to possibly find out what oppresses them and work together to bring those down. It says the truth of renaming our struggle, seething in secret, the mirror of the ugly cowards, and taking the moment now. They're tying us to the ground, watching them hammer the nails. I see this stanza as the truth of renaming our struggle would be, it could be read in two ways. Either A, we're now seeing the truth of our struggle and renaming it. It wasn't actually this, it was something else entirely, maybe even something put there by those in power. It says that we were seething in secret. We were upset about this, but not verbalizing it. So if you don't actively say that something upsets you, you can't find others who are in your same position. You can't find strength in numbers. It's a way to isolate. He says that they're tying us to the ground and we watch them hammer the nails. So we are watching others in our position being abused. I don't know necessarily what this is supposed to represent metaphorically, but being tied to the ground, that's such a strange term. I immediately think of, was it Gulliver's Travels? The dude who ends up finding the town of like miniature people and he ends up getting tied down. But I also think of hammering the nails with the concept of ground reminds me of putting the hammers or putting the nails in a coffin, and thus if you get lowered into the ground, you are now tied to it, not physically by rope tied to the ground, but you are still stuck within it. So it could be saying that we see one by one they're killing us, and we sit on the sidelines and watch. He says, I'm bringing them bile, and I'm clearing desires, coins on their eyes, I'm clipping the flowers. So he says, I'm going to spit all this toxicity that I can towards them. Coins on their eyes would be giving them passage into the afterlife. So I'm talking about killing them. Clipping the flowers is removing the beauty and the purpose, leaving only the stem. He says, I'm clipping the flowers of spiritless leaders. They tremble in towers, lonely people with power, devoured by God. I really like the rhyme scheme on that. Moving from towers to power and then devoured, kicking off the next line rather than rhyming it at the end. But he talks about them being devoured by God. I really like that line. Spiritless leaders devoured by God, allowing their religion to dictate their every move, but not actually feeling their religion, not actually being religious, not having spirit within them, just being devoured by their religion. Says everybody's screaming, no, this cannot be. As we wash the blood from our feet, the host of heaven's melting trumpets now. I don't know what it is with the melting trumpets. Trumpets in religious context, especially Judeo-Christian, is often a declaration. There's the 7 trumpets that sounded during the fall of Babel, was it? I might be getting some stories mixed up there. But I also know that trumpets are used to announce the second coming of Christ too. It's always something massive. And here it says that the hosts of heaven are melting the trumpets. There's nothing else to declare, or at least they're not going to allow any more news to be delivered. He says, so we'll find them, we'll bring them, we'll cut them down, we'll take what they love and we'll burn it in a fire. At the end, saying that through all of this, it was me. It was you, converging into 2 desperate to be left alone. And I really like this line because I think it can be interpreted in multiple ways. We've already talked about the concept of isolation versus unity and strength in numbers. This right here, I think, is a way of saying that. It wasn't just me here during this revelation. It was also you. We worked together because we only wanted one thing: to be left alone, just to live our lives. We're tired of people butting into it. But I think it's interesting that it can also be read in another way, too. The us versus the them. The revolution versus those in power that are putting their boot down. All of us are humanity. All of us sort of want the same thing. We just want to live our lives. You're just overreaching a little bit. In the end, though, it's always going to be me and you converging because we're all humans. Where that convergence might be a joining, it could also represent a coming together, not necessarily positively, of increasing in strength or in power, but just coming together as opposition, a clashing, converging at a point rather than converging into one. He does say that we converge into 2, which is interesting. Usually convergence would leave one left. But yeah, generally speaking, this song is very angry. I'm interested in how there's a melancholic element to it and what the penultimate section, the acoustic bridge, might represent. I don't get any of that in the lyrics. I was expecting something a bit more somber here, and there is an element of loss. There is an element of, wanting more in here, but it all comes across as anger, as rage, more so than anything else, which I certainly do feel an aggression to the song. It comes with the territory of extreme metal. This is something I talked about earlier, that sometimes I can't see past it anyways. It is the core element to a lot of extreme metal for me. And to be fair, I also didn't really hear it until we hit the bridge. That's when I started to feel something else in the track. I wonder if then maybe I shouldn't have attempted to extrapolate the feelings I had during the bridge into the rest of the track. Maybe the aggression that I originally felt is what was intended. But I still feel that that chord progression is, if not identically represented, at least parallelly. Parallelly? I don't know that word. Uh, it is still semi-represented in the rest of the track. And I don't see any of that in the lyrics here, or at least not a dominant sound in the lyrics. This is very much saying that life is not the way it should be, and we need to work together to root out the negative aspects of it, to bring them into the light and cut them down, to make sure that they do not rise up again. These are my thoughts. Deafheaven's Revelator. Let me know what you thought of this. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on, maybe you have your own thoughts, opinions, or perspective on, put all of that down in the comments section, as well as anything else you'd like to add to the conversation. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.